And you are watching OpenLine. We are glad that you are tuning in here to News Channel 5 Plus, here with Clint Kelly, attorney Clint Kelly. If you joined us, if you were with us before the break, of course, we were bringing you the story that Clint has been involved in regarding medical malpractice. And of course, that was the infant that was mistakenly operated on. Kind of what is the situation with that infant at this point?
Right now, Mama's going to take the child to a pediatrician outside the Nashville area. There's a couple of reasons that. First of all, there's been so much coverage of this story. I think it maybe some pediatricians uncomfortable to get involved. And then, of course, there's the fact that doctors from the same community typically take up for each other. So in order for her to get a second opinion and a fresh opinion, she's going to go have the child evaluated outside of Nashville. And hopefully everything will be okay, Chuck. We don't know because he's only 2 months old, a little over 2 months. But Mama's probably having the greater problem right now because Mama feels like she was violated.
Right.
And that's something that's going to take some time. There's a mental scarring involved in that. And I think that's another reason why you've seen so much attention to this story, particularly from women and mamas, is they can all relate to how Miss Melton feels, because that nursery is it's supposed to be such a safe, almost a sanctified area, and when something like this happens, it's a betrayal of trust. I mean, that's the best way I know to say it.
Absolutely. And obviously, I mean, an infant, there is nobody in that nursery that can speak for the infant. If you were an adult and you were in your hospital room and somebody tried to take you for an operation and you're like, what are you doing? Obviously, an infant's not able to speak for him or herself. So isn't there some possibilities of that whole situation changing the nursery situation?
Yeah, I got a call from a doctor who practices in Cincinnati who said that there is a movement afoot to try to eliminate the nursery altogether, but for cases where a child is born, handicapped or has some, life-saving measures that are necessary, and basically moving the child's crib in with Mama and Daddy throughout the entire hospital stay, so that Mom and Dad are involved in decisions for the child at every step of the way, also can be there sort of as a check and balance. But most importantly, the child never leaves Mom and Dad's view, because there have been some babies stolen.
Right.
Chuck,
right.
It doesn't happen as often as it did because they've got more security. But if the baby's in the room with Mom and Dad, it's pretty hard for something bad to happen to the baby, because you've got the parents there being able to supervise.
Right, so it's a double safeguard that way.
Right.
So if you do have a question or comment on the story that we've just been telling you about, or if you have a question or comment on another situation that you would like to talk to attorney Clint Kelly, please give us a call. We're going to go to the lines right now. Carol is on the line. Carol, thanks for your patience, and do you have a question or a comment for Clint?
I had a question. I have a case if I had a situation where I was in the emergency room and the doctor was having difficulty incubating me, and it took them over 2 hours before they could get me incubated. I ended up in intensive care for 7 days, and now I have a difficulty with my throat.
Carol may have a case. She's talking about intubation, and that is a process where the anesthesiologist or the nursing anesthesiologist will pass a tube down the throat into the windpipe and into the lungs and breathe for the patient. It's a fairly routine procedure, but the problem that comes in situations like this is if the tube that they use is too big for the patient's windpipe, and if it's forced down or jammed down, and in some cases that's unfortunately done, you can damage vocal cords, you can damage the inside of what they call the pharynx or larynx. Usually those damages are temporary, but in some cases they can be long-term or permanent. So, Carol, you might have a case if the person who was trying to pass the tube was negligent in either passing it too forcefully or was using the wrong size tube. And of course, being in ICU for 7 days, that's serious business. So Carol might have a case.
All right.
The doctors, they ended up having to use a baby's, they had to use the baby's size tube to try to pull that adult size tube out because because the way that it affected my throat.
Yeah, I think Carol may have a case. It's going to depend entirely on what occurred in terms of that initial insertion, if there was anything wrong with that. Now, there are some situations where they will pass a tube and they will encounter some anatomy that they did not expect going in, and that is a risk of intubation. But it sounds to me like there's more to Carol's story, and she might well have a case.
Okay. So, Carol, thank you so much for calling in this evening. And again, if you are just now tuning in, we were talking about things that can go wrong in a doctor's office or in the hospital in that situation. And what do you do? And we do have a number for you. You can call the Kelly firm. And if you stay tuned, we will give you that number a little bit later on in the show. So, again, Carol, thank you and have a great evening. We're going to go right back to the lines. And John is on the line with us. John, good evening. And do you have a question or a comment for Clint?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, go ahead.
I have a situation where I'm in an apartment complex. I'm a senior citizen. But I have understood that mobile causes a bad problem for the breathing apparatus in a baby, a young person. I'm wondering what can be done. I've tried and tried to get people to do something. They say they sprayed Clorox. That's all the treatment they give them. The problem.
John, I didn't understand. After you said apartment, I lost you. It didn't come through very well. What's the problem?
I've got a mold problem.
Mold problem.
Mold problem. Oh, I see.
Children around here, they all stay sick all the time. And I'm wondering what can be done about a mold problem when the management doesn't take care of it.
You know, part of being a good medical malpractice lawyer is knowing your limitations, and I wouldn't have the first clue, John, what to tell you about mold. But I'll tell you this, there are a lot of lawyers who advertise with experience in handling mold cases, ones that handle a case like yours, and a lot of them advertise online. Some of these firms are fairly substantial, so what I would advise you to do is I would go online and look for an attorney who specializes in mold or environmental litigation, and contact one of those lawyers immediately and see if they would evaluate your case and take it.
So, John, that's great advice, Clint. So, John, hopefully that you can do that, do a little research on your own, and we hope you the best in that outcome. So, thanks for calling in tonight. Now, another thing that people, I think, need to be aware of is when some situations happen, what do they do? How long do they have until they need to contact an attorney? So, kind of give us the rundown on that.
All right. Well, the first thing that people need to know is what is medical malpractice. And it's really two things. It's a bad medical mistake that causes a bad injury which would not otherwise have occurred. If those two things are married together, then the patient has a potential case. In Tennessee, we have what's called a 1-year statute of limitations, meaning that you must give notice to the doctor or the hospital within 1 year of the date that you discover that you've been injured, or if there's a death, 1 year within the date of death, in order to be able to make a claim. If you wait longer than that year, and there's no exception, say the person's not incompetent or say the person's not a child, then your claim is barred. And I plead with people every time when I get on this show, Chuck, if you think you have been a victim of medical malpractice or a family member has, pick up the phone and call me. It's free. You don't pay anything unless I take your case and I win you money. And if I say you don't have a case, you've lost nothing. But if you sit and you wait and you think, well, I might get better, or some doctors will tell patients, let's wait a year and see what happens. And I've had cases where patients have done that. They have not gotten better. They'll call me and ask me to investigate the case, and I'll say, I'm sorry, I can't take it, because the statute of limitations bars your case. You've slept on your rights. And a lot of patients have no idea. They don't know what the law is. They like call me up and say, well, that's not fair, and I agree with them. But, Chuck, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And we have a really, really tight window of time in which patients have to do something. So I always tell the people who watch the show, act. Pick up the phone and call, because it costs you nothing.
Right. So the worst thing that you could do is just, if you do feel like you have a problem, is to just hope you get better. You really need to have that checked out.
And there are some people who have great resistance to suing, and I respect that. There are people who don't want to be in the civil justice system, who don't even want to think about suing their doctor. But when their problems or their burdens or their injury becomes too great to bear, and they've waited too long, and they finally decide, I've had enough, I've got to go get justice, and then they call after the year, they're devastated to find out they don't have a case. So it just never hurts to call and get an opinion, and then if you decide you want to go forward, you can.
All right, so good advice. So we do have people on the line with us. We are going to take a break. Hold on the line with us. We will get to the calls right after this break. You are watching Open Line. We're talking about medical malpractice with attorney Clint Kelly. We'll be right back.